Okay, so this next part, I want to talk about. I'm going to try to talk about two things in this next hour here. We'll see how well I do with this. One, I want to talk about import-export options from both programs, from Rhino and Max, and I want to talk about materials mostly, and a little bit about lighting and rendering, but mostly materials, because I don't feel Max is really nice because you can create materials, like very sophisticated materials in Max, and if you have 3ds Max design, you actually have architectural materials built in, whereas with Rhino, as you guys probably know, it sucks. Like, it doesn't really have materials. I don't like the way it handles materials, and even with V-Ray materials, they're very hard to use correctly, okay? You're going to find that the kind of sculptural ability that Max has, this kind of like, you know, like what you see is what you get, also applies to the way that it handles materials, and it's so helpful, okay? So we're going to talk about that a little bit today, and I'll tell you what, honestly, currently my workflow is to do, I do like schematic design in Max, I do sort of like design development in Rhino to get the kind of precision stuff I want. Then I actually do the lighting and the rendering and all that stuff back in Max again. So I do quite a bit of like back and forth on these things. Max is just superior in a lot of ways for presentation stuff, you know. Let me, I need to plug in my computer because the outlet is working. Hang on. Okay, hang on one second. Is there an outlet back there, Marcus? Can you juice me up? Thank you, sir. Okay. Yeah, one of these my outlet doesn't work. Sorry, I'm losing. I don't want to run out of power in the middle of this. There we go. That's good. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is talk about import-export, and the thing that you guys are going to be that I might want you to do mostly is to export out of Max and into Rhino. How many of you guys own Rhino on your machines? Can you show of hands? So like mostly you don't. Okay. This is one thing. I mean, it's good to have your own copy of Rhino because you don't have to work in the labs. The other thing is that it actually gives us access to a tool that I think is really useful. But let's just take a look at. So I have a form here. I have a torus knot that I created in the viewport. And this is a pretty representative piece of geometry, right? It's got a lot of curves in it, but it is made out of polygons, okay? At the end of the day, like it's still polygons. Actually, let's do a teapot instead. Teapot's probably better. So you have a teapot, and if you reduce it enough, so there's pretty low. That's definitely made out of polygons. If I have another copy of it and I increase, you guys know this, if I increase the resolution of it, let's say to 8 segments, right? It's still made out of polygons, but it looks pretty smooth to us. This thing looks like a video game, like a Tron thing, okay? Anything can be exported out of Max and into Rhino if you don't mind what it looks like, which is we probably all do. So to export into Rhino, there's lots of different formats that you can export to, because Rhino reads practically everything, but the one that you want to use is actually OBJ. Okay. If you use OBJ, you won't go wrong. So I'm going to throw this out as a teapot OBJ. The settings.
That's why I used object.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
That's what I use for Ecotech.
Yep, OBJ is really useful in a lot of software. I usually uncheck the flip YZ axis, I suppose. You'll find out that when you import it, it's like sideways. You can always just rotate it, in Rhino. But why would you, if you don't have to? Okay, so to avoid rotating it, you want to uncheck that box. If you forget, it's not the end of the world. Okay, export. It does this weird old kind of like dialogue where it tells you how many vertices it exports and such. Fine, done. Open up Rhinoceros. I have Rhino 5. This works with anything. You go to Open, and you can just change your file type to OBJ, and you just grab your teapot and say Open. And I usually you can say like map OBJ-Y to Rhino Z, import groups as nothing. I don't like to group stuff. Oh shoot, actually I did the opposite. Okay, so here's the thing. If, yeah, I did it twice. OBJ is notorious for this, for flipping the axes. This usually stays checked by default. So I flipped it twice. So if I open this up again, and I choose the option for map Y to Z, yeah, now it's going to be in the right plane. Only check one of them. If you do both, you just undo it. Okay, so check this out. So you can see that these things, you know, basically are going to come in exactly as they are. You know, I told you guys how Max kind of applies a little bit of smoothing to it in like the graphics card, but you really have a really faceted thing and a more faceted thing, but it has so many facets that it looks smooth. But here's the thing: if you look at it, these are meshes, okay? And meshes are not going to interact with surfaces that you make in Rhino. Most of the things that we've taught you guys how to make, actually I would venture to say everything we've taught you how to make in Rhino is a surface, okay? And they don't play well together. If I have, let's just say I make like a sphere or something like that, and I'm probably going to be proven wrong, and this happens to me all the time, but if I Boolean these things together, yeah, it's not gonna let me select that. Like, it's not gonna tell me that I can't. You're just gonna click forever, and it's not gonna let you select that object because it's not valid. Meshes can mesh with meshes, Booleans can mesh with Booleans, but meshes and Booleans can't like mix together. You can't weld one to the other. Okay, I'm making the same point like 10 different ways. So you have to do something like to it in order to get it to interact with the rest of your Rhino model. That isn't to say though that you can't have them together in the same model. Like if I had some object that I just could not make in Rhino and I just needed to put it into my Rhino model, like let's say you made a chair or something in Max and you just want it in your house that you made in Rhino. You can do that. That's not going to hurt anybody. Okay? Make 2D is going to work just fine actually. Or actually no, it's not. Here, hang on, I'll show you this. Here's what's going to happen. So if I do Make 2D, I can't select that, okay? Because it only works on surfaces. It doesn't work with meshes. So what you can do is this. You can say mesh to NURB, and it's going to crunch, and now both objects are actually, both objects are inside each other. I'm gonna remove the mesh, and now look at how dense it is though. But this is a poly surface. So what it did is it turned each mesh into a quad like surface and then made a group out of them. So in kind of a, in sort of like a crummy way. So you look at that though, when I render it, I don't know if you guys can see this, it's still faceted. You can see that how there's like facets there, even though the monitor is kind of hard to make out. It's not smooth. It's not smooth in the way that like my NURBS sphere is. Look at that. Okay, so perfectly smooth, Tron, okay? These two things are going to be, they're just not the same, okay? Because again, the NURBS thing is just a simple mathematical representation. This is like raw point data it's a brute force like surface, okay? But, and this is important to the discussion here, now I can make 2D it. So I can go in and it lets me do it. So it's going to crunch, 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 but check out what you get. You're going to get the wireframe of that object, okay? And that may be okay. But, if you wanted just the contours of it, you wanted to look like a drawing of a teapot, right? You got your work cut out for you. Like, you've either got to deselect or, like, erase all the ones that don't matter, or you've got to trace and snap to them in Illustrator. Like, oh my God, there goes your weekend, okay? There is actually a way to get around this, but we can't do it on the school computers yet. But I'll show you it anyway, because I think you need... So, let's say this, though. Make 2D does work, though, okay? And if you have, let's say that you have something relatively simple in here, though, that you want to export, you can certainly do that, and it'll make your life a little bit easier to do that. Let's say that you actually want that aesthetic, you want that wireframe, then fine, then don't worry about it, right? You can do that. So Make 2D will work if you convert it to NURBS. If you want to smooth this thing out, though, there's actually a tool called T-Splines, and you can get it for free. So if you own Rhino, you can go to the Autodesk educational website where you get Revit for free and 3D Studio Max and AutoCAD, and you go down the way to the bottom, and there's actually a T-Spline plugin that you can download for free if you're a student, which you all are. And T-Splines are pretty cool. So keep this mental image in your head here. And then I'm going to show you what T-Splines will give you. So I'm going to go back, and I'm basically going to redo what I just did. Only instead of converting it from mesh to NURBS, I pick the object and I go to T-Splines and I say convert to T-Spline. And now it says T-Spline mesh. Like nothing happened, right? It doesn't actually like look like anything. But then if I go in, I can say toggle smooth. Ah, shoot. Hang on a second here. This is going to happen. Yeah, okay. So we say spline meshing options. Hang on a second here. This actually, this kind of surface might not work. Let me show you something else. Really, this will work here. So I take my torus knot, which has the same problem, right? It's going to make a bunch of like facets. Let's look at it as a shaded view. Okay, so if I go mesh to NURBS and I say make 2D. Crunch, 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 crunch. Look at all those surfaces. Okay, that's what it gives me. Which, you know, you may like. It's fine. But I can go in, I can go T-Splines, and let me delete that surface there. Go to T-Splines, and I can go in and I can say convert to T-Spline, and then I can say smooth it. Okay. And now it doesn't, I mean, it doesn't look like anything, but this is actually, and I can say go convert to Rhino object, and now I actually have checked out, I have a surface. And that is actually going to be a smooth surface. So if I say make 2D, you get what you expect. And so let me kind of explain what happens here. So T-Splines are, what it does is it takes all the, okay, so if you had an infinite amount of time and patience, you could take this object and you could take the mesh of it, right, and you could draw splines and connect each point to each point and draw the contour of it and then loft all those together, and you would rebuild the surface in Max, right, as a smooth torus knot, okay, but that would suck. T-Splines actually kind of does it. What it does is it takes all the point locations, creates a network, and it creates these like T-Splines, which are like multi-directional splines, and then it creates a surface out of them, like basically. So you're essentially reconstructing that NURB. So this thing is a surface. It's a true surface. Like I took it out of Max, and I can boolean it. And I don't know. I think this is just awesome sauce, but. So I can actually boolean it. Actually, I'm not less cool when I do it that way. But so all the stuff, you know, all the stuff that you want to do, it's going to allow you to do. Whereas when it was a mesh, it was dead to you. There's nothing you can do with it really. I mean, there's some things you can do with it in Rhino, but not the stuff you guys want to do. Okay, so make 2D and T-Splines, very good to know. Okay. Okay. So we've gotten something out of Max and into Rhino in two different ways. Right? We can get it in as a mesh, and we can get it in as a surface with the T-Splines method. Okay. That being said, I should say too, if you have really simple, if you have simple like geometry, like those boxes that we kind of pushed and pulled, the kind of faceted thing, that thing's going to pop in no problem. You convert that to NURBS and you can go to town because it's not very complex. And when you make 2D, that's what you want, okay? So I'm not trying to poo-poo on all this stuff. The other thing, what we want to do is get something out of Rhino into Studio Max. And I'm just gonna do something really really simple. I'm trying to think of something I can make that. You know what? I'm gonna do a Boolean. That'll be something I can do. See these really nice NURBS, objects, and we can Boolean them. And Booleans they're okay in. Look at how clean that looks. Like how perfect that looks, right? We got this object. You can go in. You can say export selected. And again, the object format, the format of choice is OBJ. So we'll just call this Boolean from Rhino. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Save objects as a polygon. Man, I think it's huge. And I think I just press OK. Yeah, and then you can actually, this is the key part here. So if I say preview, that's what it's going to look like. Isn't that crazy, though, how that subdivides? Like how not clean that is compared to the stuff that you see in Max. But that's because that's how NURBS work. Like NURBS are really special math that's going to facet the shape in such a way that it's as precise to the original form as possible, which means it's going to look as good as it can. This is what most of the time it's what the graphics card sees, and so that's what it cares about, right? It wants to make it look like it's a perfect Boolean. But we're architects; we actually do care about the faceting because we have to build the damn thing, right? So exporting stuff out of Rhino is gonna look pretty hinky, like if you're doing these like Booleans and stuff. But again, if you're just rendering a view of it for a client, we don't really care because we're gonna build this, we're going to laser fab this by cutting sections of it or cutting panels out of it or panelizing it. We're going to get planar quads. It's going to look really nice. But Max needs, the geometry. So, okay. Crunch, crunch, crunch. And, okay, always got a preview, because you can see, well, actually, I don't want to do that. I might crash my computer. But you can add, more detail or less detail, and you want to kind of understand what you get. Most of the time, the middle one is fine. So I go OK, and then I go into Max, and I'm going to do new file, and then you're going to go to import, and let's see here, yeah, Rhino from, and it does all this stuff, and it's gonna. You do not want to flip the axis because I think it should come in okay. Yep, I think all these are fine. Except for when it doesn't let me. Hang on a second. My monitor is too. Okay, press import. When I plug it into the projector, I lose so much screen space. Okay, there we go. So I imported it, and check it out. It's exactly as we saw it in Rhino. Okay, and again, that's what you see, but really, it's still pretty good. It looks right. Okay. Okay, and we could do things like put it on a plane and throw shadows on it and stuff. So it's gonna look right. Okay. Okay. So the next piece. So that's import export. So we import things in from Rhino when we want to add better materials. We want to do rendering. We want to do animation. We export things because we want to fabricate them, or we want to play with Make 2D. Generally speaking. Okay. Okay. So the material editor is the next thing I want to talk about, and this is where you create your own materials. If you click on the button, you typically get this view, which is considered the slate material editor. I'm going to play my old person card and say that I don't like this. This is new, and I find it really confusing and indulgent as an interface, so I'm not going to use it, and that's my prerogative. I'm going to go to the compact material editor, which is what I am used to using, which looks much less like fancy, right? but I think it's more understandable. Okay, instead of burying everything in nodes, you just scroll up and down. It looks like the Max interface. Okay, like you guys have got a little bit of familiarity with it now. I feel like we can talk about this. So if you there's already these kind of base materials that come pre-programmed into the system. I don't really care about those. I'm going to take a blank material, a little blank slate here, and just show you. So there's these architecture and design materials if you click on this button. And if you go through these like mental ray materials here, there's like concrete, and it's actually, this is kind of crazy. It's already set up with some parameters here. So if I double click on this swatch, I get my little blob of concrete. And you can see it actually has like a little bit of a bump map applied to it. It's got a texture applied to it. You can do like what kind of finish it has. So if it's like I used a curved broom or I have polished concrete. You can do weathering. It's kind of crazy. Anyway, you can do that, and then you can apply it to your material. Apply it to your object. And then by default, it's going to render, if you use the mental ray renderer, which is the default, if you haven't touched anything, it's going to look like, concrete. Okay. So that's, if you don't have time to mess around, the stock materials, there's very smart, like custom materials built in the system. But there's something kind of wrong with this, though, right? If you take a look at it, I need to zoom in a little bit more, actually. I feel like, oops, whoa, cancel. Let's zoom in here. If I render it again up close, we'll take a look at what we've actually got here. Let it finish rendering. It's kind of cramped though. I mean, it doesn't look like what we saw, right? It's like splotchy, not a lot of like detail. What's going on here? Well, the problem with it is that it's not actually mapped. This is the problem with the way when you guys use like Viz materials or V-Ray materials in Rhino, is that you may not know about mapping. Like you may know, okay, apply material and I render it in V-Ray, but like why is my texture splotchy, or why are my bricks like 3 feet tall, or whatever, right? So mapping is the key. So I want to talk about mapping, and to do that, you want to enable realistic materials or shaded materials with maps. Okay. And hang on a second here. And then what I want to do is I need to make sure that you want to actually check. You want to make sure that the show shaded material in viewport option is selected. And it's usually on by default. But hang on, this is not. Gotta play with this a second. Not letting me do shaded materials with maps. All right. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, now we're in business. Let's see here. Materials. Did I do without maps? I want to do with maps. Wow. Okay. Okay. Well, let's maybe it's working and I'm not seeing it. The secret is to go in and go to UVW map, and you add that as a modifier to your form, okay? And then you add a box. So there's different mapping types, and what we've got is basically a box, right? For all intents and purposes. Oh yeah, it actually is there. Oh god, you guys can't see it. It's too much. It's too bright in here. I'm actually gonna make a fake material just so I can prove my point, because this is not. There are material differences, but they're so subtle you can't see them. So, okay, take a step back here. There's architectural materials. There's also just kind of you can do like a standard material, okay? And this is a good opportunity for me to show you some of the different like parameters for any material. Materials have different kinds of colors. They have like the diffuse color, which is actually what color that thing is. Okay, so that if I do that right, that's a red material. Okay, it's a red diffuse. So I make it green diffuse. Okay, ambient is whatever color that object is when it doesn't have light applied to it, which sounds kind of weird. Usually it's the same color as diffuse because why else would it be a different color, right? Even if it's dark. But you can get weird effects if you change that. Like you can make it so that when a shadow strikes it, the shadow turns like orange. Sometimes you want that. I don't know. Specular is the color of the highlight in the material. So if we look at this up close here, and you can play it with the highlights. So the specular level, you can see as a distribution curve, makes it shinier. Specularity, okay? Glossiness makes it glossier, which actually decreases the, it makes the shine have more peak. You can see the kind of waveform here. If you decrease the glossiness, but you have a high specularity, right, you have a material that has, kind of like a matte finish. Right? So there's like, if you buy photos, there's matte or glossy. Okay? So that's what those settings are. The specular chip here is usually white, right? But you could actually do something where you can make the specular color a color. And there are materials that do this. They have like opalescent finishes or like adenized, kinds of materials or whatever, right? But I would avoid that. Like that gets really weird. White is fine. You don't have to be, there's still a little bit of purple in that. There, okay, white. You can play with the opacity, just like out and out. You notice all these checker backgrounds here? The checker background is important because it actually allows you to, hang on a second here. Yeah, click the checkbox here to see, what kind of transparency we have, okay? Notice, though, that it looks like a piece of plastic. Like, where's the back of it, right? Like, you don't see that. Well, you have the option to make something two-sided. So now we're looking through both sides of the material, and it looks more realistic. This looks like kind of cartoony, right? So there's different options for the different materials. Zero opacity is gone, basically. Has a shine to it. 100% is opaque. Okay. So specularity, diffuse, ambient. Those are like the major things. You can make kind of a lot of materials, basic materials, just with this method.
What's self-illumination?
You can actually add a value to it.
It's like neon.
You make it a light source. Yeah.
To make your own type of lights.
Kind of, yeah. Like, you can make a torus knot and make it white and make it self-illuminating, and it'll actually cast light in the shape of a torus knot. So you can make your own fixtures.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't get into that stuff. That's a little crazy. There are little swatches next to this, right? And if you click that, you get all these maps. Now this is crazy, but I'm going to talk about a couple of them. So a lot of you guys have taken comp methods, so we can talk about this. There are actually parametric material maps that can go into the different slots of a material. So these are actually like little programs. And one of them, my favorite one, is noise. And so if you have a noise map applied to the diffuse, let me go back up a level here. Hang on a second here. Yeah, go back up. So now I have a little M for map. Now see, that was green. You're like, well, what happened? Well, the map is applied to it. Even though it's green, the map is taking like precedent over it, right? And I take that map type and I can go in and now it's just like the noise thing that we had in our when we played with the ripple modifier. We have a size for it. We have we can add like fractal noise to add. We can change the. Hang on a second here. Why am I not able to scroll up and down? This is really weird. Hang on a second. Oh, this is going to be a bad day if I can't scroll. Okay, maybe I could. Okay, so I can change the swatches. So I can do like by combining two different like colors for that noise slot, I can construct a more complicated, texture. So I almost have kind of like a camouflage here, right? And because it's procedurally generated, like a program generates it, a big problem with like textures is that they tile, right? So if I have a picture of a piece of wood and I want to apply it as a wood material and it has a knot in it, and I put it over my building, I'm going to see that knot every like 5 feet or whatever, and it's going to look fake, okay? procedurally generated textures never repeat. Like, it's mathematically impossible. Like, which is actually great. So it's like I don't even have to worry about like tiling it, okay? Because because it's mathematically generated. You can combine like pictures and procedurally generated stuff to make even more complicated textures. Let me give you some high contrast here, just so you can actually see the effect that I want you guys to see. Okay, so you can play with this a little bit later, and you can play with the proportions of them. Okay. There's all kinds of settings here, but the secret, really good render people make their own materials. Like a lot of them, they don't just buy them. Like they actually make custom materials for the project. So this is the point that I wanted to make. I'm going to apply this material to my object here, and this is the part that I need. So that the green is the diffuse, but if I go in and okay. Should go with maps. This is so bizarre. Hang on a second here. Okay, there we go. So if I have this applied, the show realistic material in viewport, and I have the settings set up to use realistic materials with maps, I'm going to get my material, okay? And so this is what's cool about this compared to Rhino is that, and Rhino 5 may have changed this, but if I go in, I apply the UVW map to it, and I want a box map for it, I can go in. Oh, and actually, I'm going to uncheck real-world map size. That's the problem there. Okay, I can do different things. Like I can change the tiling of it in the viewport. So if that's not tight enough, hang on a second here. What is wrong with this? Fit the map. Huh. It should show. Oh yeah, because okay, yeah, this is the okay. So when you have a map that is procedurally generated, I guess it doesn't really matter. But the tiling is actually controlled by the map, so I can control the density of the tiling here. I'm not getting the feedback that I want. It's supposed to update it. Oh, there we go. Okay. So if I actually double the tiling in the material, I can see what it's going to do right there in the viewport, and then I can take the gizmo. Well, actually, this is going to be a bad example. Let me make a brick. Let me make a brick one. So there's actually material for masonry. We'll apply this as a material, and so if I check that box there. Hang on a second here. This is not working well. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. It's for some reason it's really buggy. Like sometimes it shows me the map and sometimes it doesn't. I'm gonna have to experiment with that. Okay, so if I go in to the UVW map, you can see the kind of masonry like joint right there. So that's not very good, right? Like that doesn't look very good. So this is where we actually need to go in and adjust the tiling of the map. So if we make it tile, more in the U and the V. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let me look at the joint color here. But yeah, there we go. Oh shoot! You guys can't see the seams, can you? Barely. There we go. Okay. Sorry, guys. Not enough contrast in here. But you can see though that I can actually dynamically change that. And so you see this piece right here. So I could go in and I could actually, I mean, if I knew what the dimensions of it were, I need to dial that in, right? But like, let's say I have some kind of aesthetic thing or whatever, I need that to rest like right there because that's where I'm going to knock that out, okay? Good luck trying to do that in Rhino, right? And make that stick, okay? And if the CMU proportions are off, I can just adjust them until they look right. And again, what if I want that edge there to be a bond, you know, like a bond on that corner? That is the advantage of doing, you know, of using Studio Max to do materials. Okay.
Can you lock those proportions together and just be able to adjust?
Yep. Yeah, and you can take. I'll show you this in a second here. So then when I render it, and it will look better with lights and things like that, but it's gonna render okay. And this is an unmapped, you know, piece, right? So that's crummy. You don't want that. Let me show you something actually. So if let's say I do that, and I'm like, I spent a long time making that. I can take another shape, and I can apply that masonry material to it. And then I go in and I can apply a UVW map to that. And then I go in and, again, I don't want real world size. And I say acquire. And I want to apply like relative. And it's going to copy the map type. So now they're the same. Gee whiz, this is really hard to see for you guys. Sorry. They're going to be the same, you know, like coursing basically. Same size CMU texture. So you don't have to like reinvent the wheel every time you like you do this. Once you set it up, it's really it gets really quick.
So when you cast a light on that, does it more joint cast a little bit of shadow?
Yeah, it does. Let me put a light in. This is a good opportunity to talk about lights a little bit more. So I think I talked about this briefly last time with lighting. I like the MR omnis and the MR spots, and a typical lighting scenario, like you can put like a sky system in there with the skylight, but right now I'm just gonna put a spotlight in the setting. Yeah, put it up a little bit more. And so this, you know, you want to kind of adjust it in multiple viewports till you get the kind of, God, I love that cast shadow though. That's really nice too. That's a new thing for me. You get good feedback on how it's going to look. Okay. Okay. And what's nice about this too, and again, this may have changed in Rhino, but is that I get some feedback. Oh, there, that actually seems to even give us that edge already. So let's take a look at that. That's gonna be bad though, because it's probably just like a desk lamp, like right on top of it. It's not gonna give us a lot of like side relief. But this is a good point to talk about. Yeah, you can see that. So you have this bump map. We'll talk about bump maps in a second here. But it's fake, right? We just made a box and we applied a map to it. But the detail in the texture is making us think that there's a mortar joint in that box. We didn't model all the bricks. We let the texture do it for us, and that's actually what really good modelers do. They make the geometry as simple as possible, and they let the texture do the work. I'm going to talk about that in a second. The next thing I'm going to do though, so we had a problem with it, right? Which was that it was too dark on the sides. So we need what's called a fill light, which is when we drop like an omni light, which is casts light in all directions, and that's going to fill that light from the side. Okay, so we have kind of a key light up here that casts shadows, and we have a fill light that gives us the relief of the form. It's going to give us a silhouette of the form. Okay, what you'll notice though, so now we go back and we render. It's going to be too bright. I would wager, or fairly bright. We lose a lot of detail. So what you probably want, yeah, it makes that look a little bit better though. Now we can see that. Okay. Let me move this over a little bit. There, I can see these both. I love Studio Max. Okay. You can go into the light lister, and you can actually dial them in. This is really nice. You have a little handy light panel. It's like your like a stagehand or something, right? And I can turn down both lights so that the contributions of the lights add up to, you know, a full light, right? But I don't want too much light, or maybe I want more light from one source and less light from another source, right? Because the one light's just a fill light. See the difference? Like if you don't have the fill in there, and that's actually simulating light that would be bouncing off of other things, and that's illuminating us, right? The sun just doesn't come down and like cast dark shadows and there's no light. sunlight bounces off of the sides of buildings and things, and it lights up things. You don't want two shadows, right? Because that also gets really weird. So you would turn off the other shadow. This is the system updating itself. I just figured that out. Like it's redrawing, and so that's what that mapping is doing. There we go. Just takes a second. And you can change the light of the color of the light. I don't want to do that. But if I render, should give me a better, yeah, it's a better rendering. Okay. And the fill light also, it's hard to make out here exactly, but my monitor, it's so dark up there. This is not a dark shadow. It's actually sort of a softer shadow. What it's actually done is it has lightened it up. Like you've actually cast light on the shadow. You don't want like black and white shadows. Okay. Yeah, this looks much better on my screen than it does on the monitor there. Take my word for it. So anyway, thinking about lighting, you can just use a sunlight system, right? But you don't have a lot of control over it the way you do like your own lighting setup, right? Like you only have control over the time of day and the place, and things like that, really, and the relative brightness of the sun. Sometimes that's all you need, but other times you want a particular dramatic effect, and you don't even know like what time of day you want or what time of day you need. So, but it is very easy to go in and make adjustments, especially in Max, right, to get the exact kind of shadow profile, you know, that you want. Okay, so that's why I like working in Max. Okay, so I was talking about the bump maps again in response to Ryan's. Like Ryan's observation that there's something that makes this look like it has a mortar joint. So if I go into the materials, I'm going to make a new material, standard again, just because I just want to have fewer options. You can go in and you can, oh jeez, it's not going to let me. Why isn't it not letting me scroll? Hang on a second. Go into maps, and there's this huge list of like maps here, okay? And I can go in, and there's actually a slot for a bump map, and I can go in, and I can even do a noise map for a bump map. And now look at that. That makes it look like it's kind of a piece of clay, right? And if I go in and I play with the parameters a bit, that's a sphere. Like it's fooling you. It's an optical illusion. I mean, if you look at the edge of it, you kind of think that it's sticking out. It's actually not. Like if I zoomed in really close to it, that edge is actually smooth. But the computer is rendering it as though there's actually light being cast on it like a shadow. Okay, it's pretty cool. That's one of my favorite things about tools like this is this kind of texture effect. And so if I applied that to something. And again, knowing that it's not actually gonna produce that. Let's see what we get for a bump map actually, if it's gonna do anything. Yeah, a little bit. So you can see the edges are still square, but there seems to be some kind of thing. There's something happening to it. What happens is that there's not enough. So this is the bump map. Let me reduce the size of it a little bit actually. Let's see what we get. If you do it fine enough, right, you can do things like popcorn ceiling or like drywall or stone that you make yourself. Let's see what that renders like, if anything. So I just made it like a little crumblier. Yeah, okay, so that shows up. So you get, you know, that kind of pattern with it. You can see, especially kind of see it here on this side. You can do, each maps have almost like in the way that you have transparency, right? You can dial up or down a map. So if I dial up the noise, the effect becomes more pronounced, okay? You don't want to do that too much because it actually looks more fake. You want to just have a dusting of it, like a subtle effect, okay? Like that it would be nice. It breaks up the surface. Like if you don't, anything, you know, that's painted, right, there's some imperfections in the drywall and the beads of paint, which looks more realistic, like that or that, even if it's just flat paint, right, on something, okay? Everything has a little bit of texture to it. So there's all kinds of different things that you can add to it. Another thing that I want to talk about are opacity maps. because this is actually a really nice way to model things. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kill these here. And actually, before I do that, I can't believe I didn't show you the most important kind of map of all, which is just a simple texture. So I'm going to make another standard material. And the diffuse channel right is the color of something. We talked about that, right? That's what color something is. And we added a noise map to it to give it a noisy color. Well, if you add a bitmap, which is exactly like it sounds, I can go in to my folder here and add an image of a can of spam to it. Okay. And I'm actually going to make it, well, yeah, make it not tile. And I go back to my, and this is the sphere here. You can change the geometry to different things. Like I can make it a box, and so that actually lets me see where that is. Okay. And so if I have a diffuse map that has this thing on it, and I actually, if I uncheck real world map scale, so that gets me is like I don't understand how it could possibly know what the real world scale of that is. And you give it a tiling of 1. You have a material that's a texture. That, in the most basic sense, that's what a texture is. It's wrapping an image around an object. But how do you wrap that image, like on an object? Like that's where mapping comes into play. So if I apply this material to this object, and let me, yeah, I need to check. Always check that box because otherwise you're not going to see it. Give it a second. Oh, okay. All right, and then I go in and I'm going to map it. So I do UVW map. Check out the uncheck real world map size. So there you go, and I've actually got that in the viewport. Now I only totaled the tile once. Okay, so it's not going to repeat it. And so what I can do is I can take the gizmo and with that texture, and I can actually move it around. And I could even non-uniform scale it so that I get the size that I want. You know, I can rotate it so that material is on there, right? And then whatever the diffuse material is, it ought to be the background, but I guess it's not showing up like that. Yeah, so that's what the background is. Now that's kind of not like an example. That's not what we would do with it very often. But let's say that you had something that wanted to be assigned, and you make a design in Illustrator, you make a texture of it, then you can apply it to something in your model. You've got that exact bitmap. Okay. You could do things. So let me show you another example of this with another material. So I'm going to make another standard material, and I'm going to go in and okay. So this is just going to be a basic material. But I'm going to go into maps, and I'm going to make a opacity map with a bitmap. Okay, and opacity maps are interesting. So a lot of these maps, like a bump map, takes a black and white image and it converts it to that kind of shading data. A transparency map takes areas that are black and it makes them transparent, and areas that are white and makes them opaque. So it acts like a mask in Photoshop, but it works in 3D. And light can go through it, which is really cool. If you have a gradient, it uses the grayscale. So this would be semi-transparent, more transparent, but still kind of translucent compared to the full black, which is completely opaque. I mean, completely transparent. So I'm going to take one of these images right now and open it up. And if you just see it tiled there, let me put the background on there. Okay, so I have done nothing. I have not Booleaned this. I have not done anything to it, but the map is actually giving us the ability to see through it. If I make the material double-sided, now it's like a wiffle ball. Okay, and again, I've done nothing. It actually doesn't have any geometry. The problem is it has no depth. But at certain scales, for certain applications, we don't really care, and I'm going to show you an example of that right now. So I have a map. I didn't do anything to it. All I did was add the map to the channel for bitmap for opacity. Okay. Let's see if this is going to work here. I'm going to apply it to the material here, and I'm going to get rid of this UVW actually and get a new one. I don't want that gizmo. So right now nothing. Gosh, I wonder if I actually have to make that setting work for everything. Yeah, I guess I do. Yep. Okay. So I've got this. It's not going to show anything right now, but you see the tiling of it, right? Let me give us a little objective here. Do a teapot. So I got a teapot, and I'm going to make it red. Okay. So I've got this teapot, and it's underneath this. But if I render the scene, you can see a teapot under the holes. Okay. And so that's just a circle I drew in Illustrator, and then I exported it as like a TIFF. And check this out. Do you notice that it casts shadows? Okay. So if you want to do things like, especially like a perforated panel or something like that, very, very easy way to do this, right? Without booleaning out. God, you'll crash your computer if you try to boolean that out, right? It'd be ridiculous. And it becomes, so if I add a UVW map to it, and I play with it, it's a planar map because it's actually a plane now. You try to make the mapping type refer to the actual object. And I begin to play with the tiling. Wow.
So could you put a light above that and then render just a view of the teapot without the screen, and it actually shows the shadows of that?
Put a light above it, and then, I'm sorry?
Like so you've got your screen, teapot, shine a light through it.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah. It's going to operate as close to a real world. So there I go. If I make the map size small and I tile it a bunch of times, and see, this is kind of dumb here, so I would probably take the gizmo and, you know, squidge it. But, you know, for perforations on stuff, like, man, you know, that's just so easy. And you can fake, like, railings and things at a long distance. So, you know, when you draw it and let the mapping, like, do the work, it's really powerful. So transparency maps, and again, so just a bitmap. You could do a noise map and have that be a transparency map. You can make like translucent concrete or something like that. Like, these maps are like stackable, you know. And I don't want to get too deep into it. I'm just kind of giving you guys a preview of this kind of thing. I don't imagine you'll use this too much in this class, but I feel like we don't really talk about like materials that much, and I think we like rely too much on the kind of canned materials when you know, it's really important to be able to kind of actually like design your own. You know, what if you make up a material? You know, how are you going to find that online on the V-Ray channel, right? But you could take a picture of it or a scan of it, make that a bitmap, you know, wrap that around it, or you could procedurally generate that texture for yourself. Or maybe you're pitching a material to somebody that doesn't exist yet, you know? So that's why these things are really useful. And I have to say, like, even if you don't do all the stuff I showed you, the architecture materials that come built in, you know, are pretty nice. They have some pretty nice settings in them. Like, if you want to make like metallic, you know, paint, or if you want to experiment with different kinds of concrete, there's a lot of materials that are built in here. The plastic material, the mirror material, that are like procedural, but they're based on an architectural like palette. So they're very powerful. Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to explain that. Like, the big things are the ability to, you know, again, see what's in the viewport with regards to mapping, you know, and having the UVW map and actually letting that adjust the tiling of something or the location of something is something that's really hard to do, or it has been hard to do in Rhino. Again, Rhino 5 may have changed that. I haven't dug into it too deeply, but the built-in rendering engine that's in, you know, Max is similar to V-Ray. It has settings that are a little bit easier to work with, so I would encourage you guys to experiment with it. Like, it's very much, you know, basically about, I mean, like, how precise do you want the image to be? You want it to be high? You want it to be a draft? Do you want to have final gather, which is actually the light bounces? And these little sliders basically determine all of the minutia that you would find in something like V-Ray, all these like arcane settings you don't understand what they are, right? those rendering sliders actually parameterize that for you, so it should save you a lot of time. Okay. So we did bitmap textures. We talked about bump maps. We talked about noise maps. We talked about opacity maps. So these are the building blocks of your custom materials, and they can be real time savers when you're in an environment like Studio Max. So for your work, you might experiment with some materials on the things that you are going to make for me, and then maybe exporting the same camera and the same geometry into Rhino, and then doing Make 2D to get some nice lines, for it. So you have a really nice diagram of that object. Okay.
How do you export the camera?
The camera will export with OBJ.
Oh.
If you make a Max camera, it'll export. So that's then they line up exactly.
Yeah. You would just set that in your camera view in Rhino?
Yep. Yeah, just open up the camera in Rhino, and then just make sure that you want to set the settings so that when you render it, you are rendering it to the same size. So if it's 800 by 600, you're 800 by 600 in Rhino. It should pop in exactly. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
When we do snapshots,
yeah.
So can we take that into Rhino?
Oh, yeah.
And make all the suppose 10 or 15 or 100 into 2D?
Yep. Yeah, any geometry. I mean, it'll take a while. Yeah, more geometry. Yep. Anything that you can make in Max can go into Rhino. It's just a matter of how is it going to be faceted or is it going to be smooth? T-Splines is a new thing for me, but I got really excited about it when I started to use it, because that's always been a problem for me, is getting this kind of clean geometry out of something in Max that's more facety. So that's a really good finding. It doesn't work for some kinds of shapes, but I think that there are ways to make it work. It doesn't like this shape because it's actually comprised of a bunch of different objects. It's kind of a cheater object, and they're not really pure geometry. So anyway, that may be just an anomaly. Okay, so let's take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk to each of you guys about what you're doing and help you out with stuff. Just talk about where we're going. So it's kind of a work period. Get your stuff together. I can bring books for you. I know you guys wanted the crematorium book. Does anybody need any other books for projects?